I did want to just mention about yesterday. Manny asked a question about Chatzos and the fact that David HaMelech woke up at Chatzos implies that maybe the auspicious time to daven is not necessarily exactly at Chatzos. Maybe it's later. Why didn't he wake up earlier? And was he able to jump right into davening right when he woke up? And so I found two things. Number one, it says David HaMelech never slept 60 breaths. I touched upon this yesterday. And what that means is that he did not even need to wash Negelwasser when he woke up because he didn't sleep long enough. I mentioned yesterday there's an argument, how long is 60 breaths? If it's a few minutes, in other words, if it's human breaths, we breathe 1,080 times in an hour, excuse me. So if you divide 1,080 by 60, you'll find that every person breathes 18 times in a minute. So 60 breaths would be somewhere around 3.5 minutes. And then if that's what it means, then David HaMelech never slept more than 3.5 minutes. According to another opinion, it goes by the sleep of a horse, the breaths of a horse. And according to that opinion, it's basically like a half hour. So he never slept more than a half hour. And according to that, he didn't have, either way, he didn't have to wash Negelwasser when he woke up. It's just the question is, what practically did he do? Did he sleep less than 3.5 minutes or did he sleep less than a half hour? But the point is that he would sleep, doze off, wake up, doze off, wake up, doze off, and this way. So when he woke up, possibly he jumped right into davening, right when he woke up, possibly, because he didn't really have to. He never really slept. The other point is that the Shulchan Aruch, in at least in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, it does mention the term that you should wake up at midnight. I don't have it in front of me, but it basically uses the term to get up. It doesn't to wake up. It doesn't use the term to wake up earlier and daven at midnight. So, which maybe leads to that other idea that the fact that you're waking up to daven, that itself is part of the auspicious time that you are connecting with, because you're waking up for that purpose. Maybe possibly it's considered connected, that you're fulfilling you're catching that moment because you're actually waking up at that moment, and then ultimately you're continuing to daven. It all connects to that moment, maybe. So that's basically on questions.
Are we talking about the Shema, or are we talking about the morning davening?
So that's a good question. I should have clarified this. We were talking about a side point that the Gemara got into. The Gemara initially was talking about the Shema, but then the Gemara got involved in this off the topic idea that David HaMelech would wake up at midnight, and we spoke about how midnight or certain times are considered very auspicious times to pray for the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, to lament over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and so that's what we were talking about exactly the fact that David HaMelech would wake up exactly at midnight for this purpose, either for this purpose or to sing praises to Hashem. And so we were talking about the auspicious time of midnight that the Gemara got involved with. But you're right, it's not really the main topic of the Talmud that we're studying. Okay, so let's go into the Gemara now. We're on page 4, page Daled, side A, Amud Aleph, Daled Amud Aleph, 4A. And we're like right in the middle of the page. We just mentioned how David HaMelech was speaking to Hashem, and he was asking Hashem for protection because he's a chassid. And he said for two reasons, two opinions in the Gemara is why he's considered a chassid, pious person. One opinion was because he wakes up much earlier than everyone else. They enjoy, indulge, and sleep. And he wakes up much earlier than all the other kings. They sleep until the third hour of the day. And he's already up at midnight. And the other opinion was he's a chassid because he involves himself in the laws of maros, of checking a blood to see if a woman is pure or not pure, and this will permit her to her husband. And because of that, he felt that, he's involving himself in an area where it's maybe below king's dignity. And yet he's doing it because he feels it will allow bring purity to women and allow them to be together with their husbands. So the Gemara continues with another statement. Amar Rabbi Yeshua Berei Rav Idi, where we're in the regular page of the Talmud, we're about 15 lines up from the bottom of the page. Amar Rabbi Yeshua Berei Rav Idi, the son of Rav Idi, said, Mikra, what does it mean, the pasuk, Va'adabra, or where do we see this in the pasuk? Mikra, what is the source for this? Did we get up to there? No, we didn't get, I'm sorry. I skipped a little piece. Let's go back. V'loy oid, that's where we're up to. V'loy oid, it's two lines up from where I thought we were going to start from. V'loy oid, not only do I involve myself with purifying a woman and checking the blood and seeing if it's considered pure or not pure, checking the embryo to see if a woman would have to consider herself a woman that gave birth or not, or to consider, or checking the sac to see if it's the size that would obligate a woman to consider if she consider her that she gave birth. So that's what I involve myself. And not only that, but everything that I do, I check the Mephibosheth Rabbi with Mephibosheth, my Rebbe. I check everything before I make a final verdict. I speak to my teacher, Mephibosheth, Va'omer li Mephibosheth Rebbe, and Mephibosheth Rebbe, Va'omer li Mephibosheth Rebbe, and I tell him, Mephibosheth Rebbe, my Rebbe Mephibosheth, Yafa Danti, did I judge right? Yafa Chiyavti, did I obligate someone correctly? Yafa Zochisi, did I make innocent someone properly? Yafa Tiharti, did I purify correctly? Yafa Timesi, did I make someone impure properly, correctly? V'loi boishti, and I wasn't embarrassed. That means I humbled myself, even though David HaMelech knew who he was. He was a great scholar. Nevertheless, he would always ask Mephibosheth and to see if he was correct. Now, yes.
So I thought David HaMelech studied with Achitophel.
So what we see is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says that he only learned from Achitophel two things, and he called him Rabbi Alufai Yudai. So it seems like he learned some things from Achitophel, but maybe he wasn't his main teacher. Now,
I thought Achitophel was considered second to David HaMelech in the knowledge of Torah.
Achitophel was brilliant, but let's just take a look in Pirkei Avos. And as far as I know, it says over there that he only learned a few things from Achitophel, right? Isn't that what it says in Pirkei Avos? 6th chapter. Let's take a look. Pirkei Avos. Yep. So here it says in Pirkei Avos that we find with David, king of Israel, who learned from Achitophel no more than 2 things, yet called him his master, his guide, and his beloved friend. So it seems like this is in chapter 6, Mishnah Gimel. So it seems like he wasn't his main teacher. Now, Mephibosheth, it's interesting. I obviously, if anyone wants to look into this, that would be, definitely worthwhile. Who were David's teachers? If you have any time and you want to search the web, that would be really nice. What's surprising is who is Mephibosheth?
Yeah.
So Mephibosheth, it does mention him in the Tanakh that Jonathan, who's Saul's son, had a son, Mephibosheth, which would imply that Mephibosheth was quite young. At least it would seem, it would seem if it's talking about Yonason's son, the grandson of Shaul HaMelech, the grandson of King Saul. Now there is another source where it mentions that Mephibosheth was Saul's son.
Yeah.
And according to that, I guess it would make, it would seem possible it would seem more, understandable, I guess, that he was, was a similar age or at least older than King David. What did you find, Miranda?
Yeah. In Steinsaltz, it says son of King Saul's son, Jonathan.
Right.
So he identifies that teacher.
And he doesn't bring the other opinion over there.
No.
Okay, there is a source that it's maybe Saul's son is, possibly, but of course that there's a verse for that. It says, Mephibosheth. Anyway, we're going to see in the Gemara here, we're going to see the 2 opinions. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he was his main teacher, Mephibosheth. It could be, but I'm just going back to what you said, Manny. It just at a certain time when he said that I am a chassid, I always ask Mephibosheth, my Rebbe. It means at this time he's his Rebbe. Could mean that he was his main teacher, but at least he always asks Mephibosheth and checks over what his verdicts. Now,
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if the name is Mephibosheth is a combination of Mephi, from my mouth, and Bosheth, which is I'm not embarrassed.
Right.
Because this is the whole point of what he's saying. He's not embarrassed by asking Mephibosheth.
Yeah. Good thinking. I'm guessing that you never learned this Gemara before, and it was coming straight from your mind, this idea. But possibly you remember it from a past study of this Gemara. The Gemara does get into his name and how we got it, and exactly as you're saying. So good thinking. Now let's continue and look forward. But actually, before I continue, I just want to mention Rashi emphasizes a point that's not so clear. That
Rabbi.
Yes.
It does point out that in the art scroll that when he had a halacha, David HaMelech went along with him. That he took he was more stringent in the halacha, so David went along with him. That he was more stringent in his pasking shilas.
Right.
Mephish Bosheth. That's what it says in Art School. I just thought I'd point it out. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that really is based on something that I'm about to mention. That Rashi says that sometimes he would make a mistake, and it would cause David embarrassment because Mephibosheth would tell him off. Well, one of the commentaries explains that doesn't mean David HaMelech made a mistake. It means that David HaMelech was not able to prove that he was right. Sometimes you're right, you just don't know a source to be able to prove it. And that's the way one of the commentaries explains this Rashi, and which ultimately explains the Gemara, that it doesn't mean that David HaMelech was ever wrong, but it does mean that he sometimes was not able to actually prove, he wasn't able to prove his point, and therefore, what Mel just mentioned, should we call you Mel or Melvin? Whatever. Okay.
Moshe Leib also is okay. No problem.
Okay, Moshe Leib. We'll try to remember Moshe Leib. So Moshe Leib just mentioned that from the Art Scroll that it's that David HaMelech sometimes was strict according to Mephibosheth's rule, and what that means is that if Mephibosheth gave a more lenient ruling, not necessarily did David HaMelech follow it, because David HaMelech was really right. But if Mephibosheth gave a more strict ruling, then David HaMelech felt obligated to follow it, even though he knew he was right, and he knew that you could be lenient, but he followed his Rebbe, being that he wasn't able to prove his point. And that's the way it is. Sometimes it takes time till you're able to find a proof. It's almost like what we say in the Haggadah on Passover. I wasn't able to prove that you're supposed to speak about the Exodus from Egypt at night until Ben Zoma came and he was able to prove it. Meaning I knew this was the correct law, I just couldn't prove it. And that's possibly the pshat here. At least one of the commentaries explains that and puts it tries to fit it into the words of Rashi, that David HaMelech was always right. And I guess the reason why you would want to explain it that way is because we know that it says about David HaMelech, halacha k'moisai. The halacha followed him. And it says, V'Hashem imoy. Hashem was with him. And the Gemara learns from there that it means the halacha followed David HaMelech, which implies like David never made mistakes in halacha, meaning he was, whatever he said he always was able to connect with the essence of Hashem's will. And meaning he had a ability called siyata dishmaya. He had a special help from heaven that he always connected with the right law. And that's a very special gift to be able to get, a special high level of love for Hashem, that your mind always sees to the correct final explanation or final verdict, and the correct meaning of Torah. And because of that, that's why you would want to say that David was always correct. He just not necessarily could prove it. And on that, we have Moshe Leib's point that if he couldn't prove it, he was machmir. He was strict to follow the other view as well. Okay, so now the Gemara continues, and it says, Amar Rav Yeshua Bereid Rav Idi. Rav Yeshua says, in the name of Rav Idi, Mikra, what is the source? What is the verse for this? That he would ask another person. It's not common. We don't find that other Rabbanim would go and check everything they said with someone else. This is quite a act of humility, and especially for a king. And so it says, what's the source? Mikra, where is the verse? And the Gemara says, V'adabra ve'edaisecha negem melachim. Ve'ed vaisecha negem melachim. I spoke in your testimonies towards kings. V'loi evaish, and I wasn't embarrassed. What does this mean? I spoke in front of kings. So it means Mephibosheth. Why was Mephibosheth called a king? So number one is he descended from a king. He was either the grandson of Shaul or possibly the son of Shaul. And also scholars are called kings. Torah scholars are called kings. So here we have a verse that he spoke in front of kings and he wasn't embarrassed. That means there must have been some way, some reason that he should have been embarrassed, and he wasn't. And he wasn't, in other words, he humiliated himself in order to do what was right, and maybe beyond, above and beyond what he was expected to do. Tana, we learned in a brisa, Loy Mephibosheth Shemai, not his name, or Tana, we learned from the Tanoim that his name was not Mephibosheth, Ella Ishbosheth Shemai. His name was really Ishbosheth. And according to this, it means it was Shaul's grandson, the son of Yonatan. However, on the side, there is a girsa that it brings from Yevamais Taisvis over there in Yevamais, and it says over there it's Ishbal Shemai. Now, according to that, it means it was Saul's son. So this is the reason why you would say the other explanation of Saul's son and not Saul's grandson, because it's Ishbal. But if it's Ishbosheth, then it means it's Shaul's. We're referring to Shaul's grandson. So obviously, the point is Shaul had a son Ishbal and he had a grandson Ishbosheth, and the question is which one of them is who David HaMelech would ask advice, check over his halachis with, and that's the one who he was embarrassed of, or he should have been embarrassed, but he humbled himself in front of him. Now, Balama Nikra Shemai Mephibosheth, and why was he called Mephibosheth? And here we have what Rabbi Yolensky told us, that he's called Mephibosheth, Shahayim Avayish Pnei David, Bahalacha, he would embarrass the face of David in halacha, and nevertheless, David HaMelech continued to ask him, even though it would be embarrassing. Lefikach, and therefore, yes.
Was Mephibosheth one of the descendants of Saul that was brought before the Urim V'Tumim for the, remember there when the priests of Nov were executed by Shaul for giving, right. So there was, in order to satisfy the neighboring, I guess, tribe that the priests came from, there was an execution, a series of executions from the descendants of Shaul. And didn't he parade some of the descendants, David, in front of the Urim V'Tumim? I'm wondering, was Mephibosheth, being a grandson or son of Shaul, was he one of the people that were executed?
I don't know. I guess we could look it up. I'm not familiar, but maybe we'll look into that. That's are you referring to the fact, the story of the Gevinim didn't forgive Saul? Is that what you're referring to? And they wanted 7 descendants of Saul to be killed? Yeah. That's what you're referring to? Right.
And in order to make that determination, the relatives, some of the I don't know if all or some of the relatives were paraded in front of the Urim V'Tumim, and it was inferred from the message from the Urim V'Tumim, which were the ones that would be hung and put at the borders of Bnei Yisrael to, I guess, as a payback for the execution.
Right. For them losing their jobs, the Gevinim would work in the tabernacle and help and work for the Kohanim. And when Saul killed all the Kohanim, they lost their jobs and they lost their sustenance. They were very angry. They didn't forgive Saul. And David HaMelech said, if you don't forgive Saul, when he said, because of that, we're not going to marry you to your families because you don't sound like, you don't act Jewish.
And I think there was a drought as well that emphasized that there was an Avera that took place that needed to be expiated.
Right. I'm not sure if the details of the names of the people who were
because Mephibosheth, do we hear from him towards the latter part of David's kingship, or is it only in the beginning part? That's why I don't remember anything from him on the latter part, and I'm thinking maybe he was one of the people executed. That's what my question.
I don't know, but it sounds like good homework. Okay, so we're going to continue. So Ishbaishas was his name, and he's called Mephibosheth because he would embarrass David's face in halacha. And therefore, Lefichach, Zacha David biyatzav mimenu Kilav. And therefore, David merited, and Kilav came from David. Kilav was a tzaddik. He was a righteous, he was very righteous, and he merited, David HaMelech merited to have him because of his humility.
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
Kolev ben Yefuna.
No, Kilav, different person. Kilav, not Kolev.
Okay, it's a
Kilav.
different spell.
Spelled differently, and it's pronounced differently. So he's called Kilav because Shahaya Machlim Pnei Mephibosheth v'halacha. Kilav is the word Kilav is from the word Machlim. We would embarrass the Chaf Lamed, and of means the father, means the father of halacha. So he was Kilav. The word Kilav, if you divide it in two, the first half means embarrassed, Machalim, embarrassed, and of would mean the father of halacha, which was referring to Mephibosheth. So David HaMelech had a son that was greater than Mephibosheth. Now, if you learn that Mephibosheth proved David wrong, and so here what happens is the Chilav would prove Mephibosheth wrong in halacha. If you learn that Mephibosheth didn't prove David HaMelech wrong, just David HaMelech didn't have proofs to prove himself to correct Mephibosheth. So here his son, Kilav, was able to find proofs to his father's opinion. So Kilav, either he actually proved Mephibosheth wrong in general, or he was able to find proofs to his father's opinion, and this would embarrass Mephibosheth. So here we have David HaMelech meriting to have Kilav. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, like Kilav Shemai ala Daniel Shemai, then Rabbi Yochanan says his name wasn't Kilav, it was Daniel. And why was B'lama Nikra Shemai Kilav? Shayam Machlim Pnei Mephibosheth. He would embarrass the face of Mephibosheth in halacha. Olav Amar Shlomo b'chachmasai, and on him, Shlomo said in his wisdom, B'ni, my son, im chacham libcha, if your heart is im chacham libcha, if your heart is wise, yismach libi gam ani, I will also be happy. Meaning, if you're able to prove me correct, or chacham b'ni samach libi. And another verse says a similar line, that my son is wise, or if you're wise, if my son is wise, my heart will rejoice. V'yashiva charfi davar, and I will reply a word to those that embarrassed me. And so that is referring to Kilav, who was called Daniel, but his name Kilav was because he would embarrass Mephibosheth and halacha. So that's the story of David HaMelech asking checking over his halachas with Mephibosheth, even though it was humiliating. Now it says, "V'David mikara lanafshi chassid." Did David really call himself a chassid? V'haktiv, doesn't it say in another chapter of Tehillim? Doesn't it say that Lulei ha'amanti lirois b'tuv Hashem be'eretz chayim? That if only Lulei ha'amanti, if I didn't believe that I would see be'eretz chayim, the land of the goodness of Hashem and the land of life, I would have been. I would have left this path because I had so much going against me that what kept me going was my trust in the goodness of Hashem in the land of life. And
Rabbi Smith, there's a lot of background noise.
Okay, let me see if it's coming from others. I'm going to mute everyone. So the verse here says lule, and the word lule has some dots above it. And the fact that it has some dots above the word lule in the official Mesorah, in the traditional way that the Tehillim is, certain words have dots upon them, or certain letters are larger. There's all different types of traditions that we have to the Tanakh. And the word lule here, the tradition is that it has dots above it. And what does it mean when it has dots above a word? It means that it's not so clear, which means that David HaMelech was not 100% that he was meriting to see the goodness of Hashem in the land of life, meaning he wasn't convinced that he's a chassid. And before we said he's a chassid. He claimed he's a chassid. And here it seems like he wasn't 100%, he didn't have clarity or absolute belief that he was meriting this. Vetana, and we learned, Mishmei de Reb Yossi, in the name of Reb Yossi, Lama Nakud al Lule, why are there dots upon the word Lule? Because Amar David HaMelech said, Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before Hashem, Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the universe, Muvtach ani b'cha, I am for sure, I'm sure in you, I believe in you, Sha'ata Mishalem Schar Tov LaTzadikim, that you will pay a good reward for the righteous, Lasid Lavai, in the future. Aval, but Eini Yodeya, I don't know, if I am going to have a portion among them. So how does it say in one psalm that David said, I am a chassid, meaning he was convinced that he will, he deserves, certain reward. And here he's not even sure if he's getting a portion in the world to come. So how do we reconcile this contradiction? And the Gemara says, Shema Yigraim Hachet. He was nervous that maybe sin will cause him to lose out, meaning he was a chassid, but the sins that he did might cause him. He was nervous that maybe he's done more sins that will make him lose out in what he really deserved and what he knew he was a chassid, but at the same time, his sins might have overpowered his righteousness. And Kidder Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi, similar to what Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi said, the Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi Rami, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi brought a contradiction. He says there's two verses that contradict themselves. It says, Ksiv, it says, Bihine Anuchi Imach, I am with you. Hashem told Yaakov Avinu, I am with you. Ushmarticha, and I will watch you b'chol asher telech, in everything that you do. As Hashem promised him that he's going to watch him in everything he does. Uksiv, but it says in another verse, Vayira Yaakov ma'oid, and Yaakov was very nervous when he was going to meet up with Esau. He was very nervous. Why was he nervous? Hashem promised him, I'm going to protect you in everything that you do, in every place where you go. I'm going to protect you. So why was he nervous when he was going to meet up with Esau? And the answer is that he's nervous that maybe he sinned afterwards. And now the promise of Hashem that he was going to protect me doesn't apply. He was going to protect me if I stay righteous. But if I, of course, if I change my path, then Hashem is not necessarily following through. As long as I stay status quo and I don't mess up, yeah. But what happens if I change my whole thing? Not necessarily is Hashem helping me, and maybe my sins are, have ruined this. And he says that the Gemara. So Rabbi Yaakov Baridi explains over there to answer that contradiction. Amar, he said, Shema Yigrei Machet. Maybe sin has caused that I don't deserve to have Hashem's protection. So the same thing is David HaMelech said the same thing. So in other words, Rabbi Yaakov Baridi says this about Yaakov, about Jacob. And the Gemara says maybe the same thing, and that answers the contradiction with David as well. And that's why King David, although at one point he was convinced that he's a chassid and deserving of certain reward, afterwards he was nervous that maybe sin had caused him not to merit it. And the Gemara continues, and it says that Kidatanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Ad Yavor Amcha Hashem, until Hashem passes your nation over, Ad Yavar, until he passes over Amzu Kanisa, this nation that you owned, that's yours. Until. So in other words, what is this referring to? The double term that Hashem is going to take us over the river into Israel. What is it referring to? So why does it say it twice? So the Gemara says, Ad Yavor Amcha Hashem, until Hashem brings you over, your nation over. This is referring to Bia Rishona, the first coming in the days of Joshua. And Ad Yavor Amzu Kanisa, until he brings you over to the land of Israel, is referring to in the days of Ezra, when he brought you to rebuild the second Beis Hamikdash. Zu Bia Shnia, this is the second coming of the Beis Hamikdash Sheni, the second Beis Hamikdash, when Ezra brought the Jewish people from Babylon, into the land of Israel. Zu Bia Shnia. Mikan Amru Chachamim, from here the rabbis say that it's comparing the two comings, and it says them in the same verse right next to each other. And it's comparing them, and it says that the rabbis explain, the rabbis said from here we see that Re'uyim Hayu Yisrael, the Jews were fit, Liasis Lahem Nes, Bimei Ezra, that a miracle would happen for them in the days of Ezra. Kederach, similar, Shanasa Lahem, similar to the miracles that happened for them, Bimei Yehoshua ben Nun, in the days of Yehoshua, which are all those miracles. Number one, of the splitting of the Yarden, Number two, the war with Jericho, the wall of Jericho fell down. The other wars that they fought, Shemesh b'Givayin Daim, that the sun stayed standing, didn't set. And all of these miracles, the Jews should have had similar miracles in the days of Ezra. Rashi says, "Lavoi biyad Rama," to come with a outstretched arm, a strong arm, with special extra strength, extra power, and similar to the miracles in the days of Joshua. Ella, but the Gemara says, rather shagaram hachet, the sin caused that they did not merit this, and they needed permission from Koresh. So Rashi explains that Biyad Rama means a strong arm, meaning gone on their own without having anyone rule over them. And what happened? They ended up needing permission from Koresh, and Koresh ended up backing out, and they needed permission from, and then in the days of Achashverosh, they still couldn't build the Beis Hamikdash. And finally, in the days of Darius, the second Darius, that's when they finally were able to, to rebuild. But again, it was with his permission. So initially, they got permission from Koresh, but then Koresh backed out, and the Kutim caused a whole uproar and claimed that they're going to rebel and so on. So Koresh took back, didn't let them continue. And then in the days of Achashverosh, we had all that Saras with Haman, and we weren't able to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash then. And finally, in the days of Darius, who at least the common understanding is that he was the son of Achashverosh and Esther, and Darius too. Number two, he finally gave us permission, but it was all with permission. In the days of Joshua, we didn't have permission from anyone. No one else was ruling us. We went biyad Rama with a strong hand and our own power. So I mean Hashem's power, of course, but without anyone without getting permission from any other nation. So we should have had that miracle, if not for Garam Hachet, because of sin. That's what ruined everything for us.